Hello everybody, Jade Hamilton here, and I've got my little Joni-Marie with me in this lovely blue floral romper, quite psychedelic actually. It's cotton and sort of ruched, and it's got flowers in orange and pink and teal all over it, because we are doing So Blue Dolly Sunday, which is Tamara's tag over at Once Upon a Nursery. If you haven't subscribed to Tamara already, do. She's a lovely lady and she's full of fun and she really tries to bring everybody together. So do check her out and subscribe if you can, because she deserves more subs. I'm also going to add in Jay at Jay's Dolls UK, her hashtag new doll clothes, because this little romper, although not new, is new to me because I finally caved and joined Vinted. And this was one of the first purchases I made. I got this in a bundle that cost me, I think £6. This was £2, and then I got another couple of rompers for I think £2 each or £1.50 each. Yeah, I've got my little Joni-Marie with me, and we are going to start another book today. It's one that I remember vividly from my own childhood. I certainly remember this series. There was a whole series of them. It's Mary Hooper's The Revolting Bridesmaid. About a girl called Katie who discovers that her sister is about to get married and she is not impressed by any stretch of the imagination. As per all videos where I read, all copyright goes to Mary Hooper and her publisher, which in this case is Bloomsbury. I own absolutely nothing. Make yourself comfortable, grab yourself a hot drink if you've got one, and we'll get going. Chapter 1. I slid down the stairs and was about to do a forward roll into the sitting room when Mum ran into the hall and more or less threw herself across the door to stop me going in. "Don't go in there now," she said, waving her hands about and pulling a peculiar face. "It's Helen and Christopher." And then she mouthed something excitedly and pulled me into the kitchen. I looked at her in concern. She appeared to have gone quite loopy. "Helen's doing what?" I asked. "Shh," Mum said. "She and Christopher are talking to Dad now. You know how he likes things done properly, your Dad." "Helen and that man," I said in a louder voice, "are doing what?" "Shh," Mum said again, sitting down on the edge of the kitchen table. "Getting married. People do, you know." "Not in this house, they don't," I said, amazed and a bit put out because I'd been the last to know something important again. "Not often. No, not often," Mum said, just sometimes. And I do hope you're not going to be difficult, Katie. You must have seen the signs after all. What signs? That she and Christopher were serious about each other, of course. Signs? I thought hard, but I couldn't remember seeing any. Real signs? Black and white, Helen and Christopher are serious signs? I hadn't seen any of those. Anyway, even if I had, I didn't exactly fancy the idea. Okay, it would be nice to have Mum and Dad all to myself, but sometimes Helen could be fun. And she gave me her old makeup and clothes. Also, if she wasn't around, I'd have to have old Mrs. Crab down the road to babysit all the time. Besides, I certainly didn't want her to marry him. She'd been out with much nicer ones. He was too old for a start, and he wore old-fashioned trousers and stupid shirts patterned with little cars or little trees. Worst of all, he was a teacher and kept asking me things about school in a bracing voice like, "How's the old history project going?" Or last week, on seeing me throwing my math homework into the bin in disgust, "In trouble with our binary numbers, are we?" I tiptoed out of the kitchen and dropped onto all fours in front of the sitting room door to try and listen to what was going on. Come away from that door at once. Or rather, come away from that door at once. Mum hissed from the kitchen. How's it going to look when they open it and you're kneeling there with your ears flapping? I'm not. I'm just sitting here examining the world of nature beneath the edge of this carpet. I said, there's a little tiny thing with 200 legs, a black beetle. Well, half of one. Come away from that door now, Mum said sternly, but not before I heard him, that man, saying something boring about mortgages and putting down deposits. I reluctantly rolled over towards her, and she looked at me and shook her head wearily. Now, before they come out, why don't you go upstairs and put on something other than that dreadful old tracksuit? You bought this dreadful old tracksuit, I pointed out. You wanted me to have one. I didn't know you'd wear it day in and day out. It was clean when I bought it. Clean and pale pink, she said with a sigh. And now it always seems to be grey. She can't marry him. She can't marry him, I said urgently, ignoring the insults to my tracksuit. He's too old for a start, and he doesn't look like a bridegroom. What do they look like then? I thought back to a black and white film I'd seen on TV on Sunday afternoon. They're good looking, like film stars, with slick back hair and shiny shoes. They've got a bouquet of flowers in one hand and a diamond ring in the other. Diamond ring in a little box in the other, sorry. I can't see any diamond rings forthcoming, Mum said. Not on what he earns. And people don't have shiny shoes anymore. But he's old, I wailed. Horribly old and fat. Don't be silly, Mum said. He's not at all fat. His face is chubby, that's all. And he's only 29. That's what he tells you. I said darkly. And Helen's 22. That's a good age difference. Fat, old, and boring, I said stubbornly. Of all the interesting people I could have had for a brother-in-law, I had to be lumbered with him. You're not be losing a sister, you're gaining a brother, Mum says. I don't want to gain a brother, I said, infuriated. Not a brother like him, anyway. If she's got to get married, then why can't it be someone in the royal family, or a pop star, or a DJ, or someone exciting? Not him. Definitely not him. Well, I'm afraid it's not up to you, she said. When you get married, you're allowed to choose for yourself. And I must say, Dad and I are very... The sitting room door handle rattled and Mum broke off and looked towards it expectantly. And then Helen and that man came out holding hands and looking at each other with very silly grins. It's okay, Helen said to Mum, smiling a big, soppy smile. It's all arranged. As if I actually had any say in the matter, Dad shouted in a jolly voice, and then I heard glasses tinkling, and he came through into the kitchen with a bottle of something on a tray. I looked at that man stonily, at his horrible shirt, silly trousers, and face with a stupid, pleased expression on it. The shame of it! Imagine having to tell everyone that Helen was marrying him. I mean, couldn't she find anyone better? Surely she could be that desperate. I looked at Helen. She wasn't bad. She had frizzy red hair and freckles, and she dressed quite nicely. So was this frump in peculiar trousers honestly all she could get? But perhaps she hadn't looked properly. Perhaps she needed a helping hand. Maybe it wasn't too late for her to find someone better. Katie? Katie, Mum said suddenly. How about having a little sip of something to celebrate? And how about a kiss for your new brother? That man said heartily. I screwed up my face in absolute disgust. Oh, Katie never kisses anyone, Mum said, moving to stand between him and my face. We've got another surprise for you, Helen said, obviously not caring that she was leaning cosily against a shirt patterned with tiny fire engines. Something you've always wanted. Not Disneyland, I squealed. Maybe they were going on honeymoon and taking me. If so, it wasn't too late for us to become instant best friends. They laughed. Not quite that, Helen said. The wedding will be quite soon, in September, and we want you to be our bridesmaid. Yuck, I said. Don't be silly, dear, Mum said quickly and brightly. You've always wanted to be a bridesmaid. That was when I was 4. Last year you had a bride doll and you... I never did, I said hotly. Anyway, you bought it for me. Well, anyway, Helen said, Christopher and I would like you to be our bridesmaid. And you'll have a lovely dress and satin shoes and everything. I made an exaggerated bleh noise, and everyone looked at me and tutted. At least it'll be interesting to see. At least it'll be interesting to see if she can be prized out of that tracksuit, Dad said. If you'll excuse me, I said with dignity. I'm going to my room to do my homework. And yes, I am getting on all right with my binary numbers, thank you very much. And I went off quickly before anyone could shout at me. I flung myself on the bed. The wedding was in 2 months, but as it was school holidays, I had plenty of time to find Helen someone better. My campaign would start immediately. Chapter 2. Isn't this all a bit sudden? I said to Helen over breakfast the next morning. Mum and Dad had gone to work and I had to go to the play scheme with my friend Daisy later, but right then I had Helen all to myself and could begin the campaign. What? She said. The wedding and everything. I mean, you haven't known him long, have you? For goodness sake, she said, sipping her coffee. She always has it black because she thinks it's sophisticated. What's it got to do with you? A lot, I said. If he's coming into the family, I've got to approve of him, haven't I? No, you haven't, she said. And now you come to mention it, I'd be very suspicious of anyone you approved of. Remember that park keeper you brought home who drank his way through all Dad's whiskey before anyone could get rid of him? Remember the lady bus driver you invited along to your McDonald's party? I looked at her darkly. Never mind them, I said. I just wanted to remind you that the divorce rate is going up. You can't be too careful. Oh, thanks a bundle, she says. Here am I, nearly engaged and bursting with happiness, and you're telling me about divorce rates. I just want you to be sure, I said, in a goody-goody voice. Kira's sister only stayed with her new husband for 3 days after the honeymoon, and Maria's mum and dad have just separated and just spare me the details, Helen said. I'll take my chances. But is he all you could get? I began, then amended it. But are you sure he's the right one? When I read the problem pages, they were always talking about whether or not he was the right one. You better let me worry about that, hadn't you? She said. And I suggest you keep your cute little nose out of it and start growing your hair so you'll make a pretty bridesmaid. I shuddered. I like my hair short in the summer. I had it cut extra short at the end of term especially. And I don't want to be a pretty bridesmaid, thank you. Helen swallowed the rest of her coffee and took her mug to the sink. Anyway, she went on, since when have you started taking an interest in my boyfriends? Since you started marrying them, I said. She groaned. Well, I'd rather you left that. Oh, well, she groaned. Well, I'd rather you left them to me. She fluffed her hair out in the mirror over the sink. It'll be quite nice for you, actually, she said, because Christopher's going to be teaching at the new comprehensive, the one you'll be going to in September. I paused, with a spoonful of cornflakes halfway to my mouth. Bradley Street? I asked faintly. That's the one. He's going to be second in command in the English department. He can keep an eye on you. You can get bullied in big schools like that. I groaned. You can get bullied if your brother-in-law is a teacher. You can get bullied if your brother-in-law is a teacher too. especially if he's a weirdo teacher with a silly fat baby face. Is the job definite? I asked carefully. Oh, yes, she said. He had the letter last week. That's what made us decide to get married. He'll be earning more money, you see. Fancy, I said, lowering the spoon. I wasn't hungry. Things were more awful than I'd thought. Now, Helen said, Christopher's parents are coming over tonight, and I want you to be on your best behaviour. She looked me up and down. You can get out of that tracksuit. That is, if it actually comes off. And get Mum to do something about your hair, and make sure you answer politely when they ask about things. Oh, and tidy your room. They're not going to look in my room. They might. They might want to look over the house. Why do I have to see them anyway? I muttered. Because they want to meet you. She looked at me and rolled her eyes. I know that sounds unlikely, but they want to see the sides of you to compare you with Christopher's cousin. I looked at her, bewildered. What for? Because she's the other bridesmaid, of course. I told you last night. I don't remember. No, you were too busy glowering at Christopher. She suddenly sat down again and put her arms round me. There's no need to be jealous, you know, Katie. I'm not going to go far. We'll still be sisters. I'm not jealous, I said, shrugging the arm off indignantly. I don't care if you're getting married. I just don't want you to marry someone who's old and boring and who's going to be an embarrassment to me. I don't care if you're getting married. I just don't want you to marry someone who's old and boring and who's going to be an embarrassment to me, I thought. Well, okay then, she said, miffed. So you will tidy your room, won't you? And get out of that tracksuit by tonight? And help us tidy the house? And be on your best behaviour, which means not rolling about the floor doing gymnastics. Anything else? I asked. Perhaps you'd like me to enrol for a charm school course too. In your case, that might be a very good idea, she said, and she went out humming something that sounded suspiciously like a bit later, Mum rang. Now, darling, I'll be home from work early, but I want you to push the vacuum cleaner round the house just to give me a start, she said. Christopher's parents are coming tonight and I want everything. I know, I interrupted. And make sure your blue dress is clean. And if you could pop down to the shop for me and... I left the receiver dangling and went to get some writing paper. Sitting on the stairs, I could still hear, and if you get a moment, could you... and also would you... As I began my letter, things were deadly serious. Desperate measures were called for. Surely someone could help me get her a boyfriend. Dear, date my mate. Could you please fix it for my sister to be on your show? She is on your TV show? She is not bad looking, crossed out, very pretty with funny, crossed out, lovely hair. The thing is, she is going to marry a man who is a teacher and wears geeky clothes, and it is just too embarrassing. I would like her to have someone half decent, and I'm sure she could find someone if she went on TV. Love from Katie Wilkins. P.S. She is not all that good at being funny, but I will fix her up with She is not all that good at being funny, but I will fix her up with a few jokes. Chapter 3. I was shiny. I was scrubbed. I was stuffed into my blue dress. I was fed up. It's just this once, Mum said. I just want you to sit quietly in the sitting room with a book on your knee. You can change back into your tracksuit when they've gone. Mum, I said plaintively, it's far better they see me as I really am. Something like a shudder ran across her face. Not just at this moment, Katie, because we want them to have a good first impression of us. And that might be difficult with you wearing a washed out grey thing with smelly trainers on your feet with one toe sticking out. She paused and looked at me, head on one side. I wish we hadn't had your hair cut quite so short, but it looks almost pretty when it's brushed. I'd practically forgotten. Mrs. Bailey will be looking at your hairstyle, you see, and trying to think what sort of a headdress might suit you. She's not choosing everything. Well, Mum said delicately, Mrs. Bailey is the after-six cocktail and continental cruise wear buyer at Bliss's store, you see, so she wants to be in charge of the bridal party. Well, Mrs. Bailey isn't going to be in charge of me, I said heatedly. Anyway, with a bit of luck, date my mate permitting, there wasn't going to be any wedding. I hoped they wrote back quickly. I could do with Helen being on the programme immediately before this Mrs. Bailey person started ordering me into something with 10 metres of sequin stone all over it. We thought a big crinoline dress for you, Mum said, pale green with rah-rah frills in lace all the way down and 6 big red bows over the front. I sprang out of my chair and the book fell out on. I sprang out of my chair and the book fell onto the floor. Never! I said. I'd rather die than wear something like that. I'll run away, join an orphanage. But Mum was laughing. Don't be silly, she said. It won't be anything like that. We'll get a lovely dress that you'll enjoy wearing. I won't, I said, unless it's going to be grey and snuggly like my tracksuit. Now, Mum said, do sit down again and try to look quiet and tidy. That means no rolling around on the floor. She disappeared, cutting steadily to rearrange a vase of flowers that wasn't quite to her liking. Elsewhere in the house, I could hear noises that meant we were about to be descended on by the bay leaves. In the bathroom, Dad was gargling. He smoked a pipe and always gargled before anyone important came, in case he breathed tobacco breath on them. And Helen was dashing up and down the stairs, saying things like, 5 minutes, I'll never be ready. This place is like a tip. I forgot to get the fresh coffee. Why aren't there any flowers in the hall? I can't bear it. I know you won't get on. It's all going to be horrendous. My friend Daisy hadn't been a lot of help. Her sister had got married 2 years ago, and apparently Daisy had enjoyed every minute of it. Everyone makes a fuss of you and says how lovely you are, and you get hundreds of You're getting hundreds of photographs, she said wistfully. And the bride throws everyone makes a fuss of you and says how lovely you are, and you're getting hundreds of photographs, said wistfully. And the bride throws the bouquet and you catch it, and then everyone says you'll get married next, and then the best man dances with you, and you get a little bit of cake in the box and a present from the bridegroom. Yuck, yuck, and more yuck. Every time she said anything, I groaned a bit more. I didn't want a rotten silk dress with rotten satin shoes or a bit of cake in a box. What's the present? I asked. A silver cross and chain, she said. But the chain makes your neck go black. Great, I said sadly. What's he like, though, your bridegroom? Oh, he's lovely, she said. He works for a firm that makes sweets and gives me loads of chocolate. Every Easter he brings me home all the broken Easter eggs. Sometimes they're just things like chocolate rabbits with a couple of ears missing. I sighed. Nothing could be more wonderful than to have someone in the family who brought home chocolate, broken or otherwise. I was having someone who brought home binary numbers. There was a ring on the doorbell, and I felt the whole house pause for a moment, rigid with horror, and then redouble their efforts at everything. Dad gargled twice as fast, Helen ran up and down the stairs at the speed of sound, and Mum, returning with the flowers, which didn't look any different, paused in the doorway and took little quick dance steps backwards and forwards, not sure whether to put the flowers down, go to the door, or what. I'll go, shall I said. No, no, Helen should go, Mum said, and then called in a voice that was half a whisper and half a scream. Helen! Door! I heard it, Helen said, in the same angry, screamy voice. And then she came down, saying in a harsh undertone to Mum, pick that up. Why is that there? The whole light's too dim. Is the coffee on? And then she opened the door, and her voice immediately changed to become all dripping with charm. Good evening, Mrs. Bailey, Mr. Bailey. Lovely to see you. And then to that man, hello, darling. I sat rigid in my allotted chair, eyes glued to the book as I'd been instructed. My campaign tonight would mostly consist of just surveying the bay leaves and working out the best plan for breaking up this unsuitable relationship. Of course, if they happened to find me a little odd, all the better. Maybe it would make them consider the wisdom of mingling with our family on a permanent in-laws type basis. Chapter 4. And this is our youngest daughter, Katie, Mum said, as Mr. and Mrs. Bailey passed in front of my chair. How do you do, dear? Mrs. Bailey said, and I looked up from my book, surprised, as if I'd only just noticed someone had come into the room. I blinked at her as if she was a strange creature from outer space. And she did look rather strange, actually, being a huge woman wearing a frilled nylon dress crossed over and pinned in the front with a sparkly brooch in the shape of a spider. The dress was vast and billowy and printed with all manner of green plant-like shapes, so the whole effect was of a small walking greenhouse. She smiled down at me, her face pink and fat and well powdered, her eyes sparkling. Mrs. Bailey's got some lovely ideas for bridesmaids' dresses, Mum said, hoping to stir me into some comment by poking my foot with the tip of her toe. And Mr. Bailey just thinks he'll emigrate until September's over, Mr. Bailey said, settling down on the sofa next to Dad. How interesting, I said to Mum. And now I must really get back to my book. What is it, dear? Asked Mrs. Bailey. British birds and their mating habits, I said. Mum poked me harder. I'm sure it's not that, not mating habits, she said. It's just Katie's idea of a joke. I looked at her, wide-eyed, demure. It is, I said. It's got some very interesting bits about wagtail pie whacker. Did you know that when it wants to mate, it goes to the top of a tree and... Do sit down, Mrs. Bailey, Mum interrupted. Beauty, dear, Beauty, Mrs. Bailey said. If we're going to be family, we ought to be Beatty and Cedric to you. Of course, Mum said, and we're Sally and Richard. Everyone settled down and began talking about the weather and other riveting topics. Mum occasionally directed a question at me, but when she did, I just frowned slightly at being disturbed. From my book, good and quiet, she said. Don't move, she'd said. The two lovebirds, as Mrs. Bailey called them, started compiling a guest list for the wedding. Everyone for coffee? Mum asked after about half an hour, and then there was a long and tedious roll call during which people decided whether they wanted it black or white, cream or milk, and sugared or non-sugared, sweeteners or brown sugar. Perhaps you could come and help me, Katie, Mum said pointedly, and I had to go into the kitchen with me. Why are you sitting there like a dummy? She hissed when we were on our own. Mrs. Bailey will think you can't speak. You said to be quiet and good, I said. I'm just following your instructions. I didn't say you had to sit there like a stuffed prune. At least try and let us see you're alive. I shook my head helplessly. I was only following instructions, I said. You said I was just to be sit there with a book and be quiet, and will you stop saying that and take this coffee pot in immediately? Mum said grimly. Furthermore, you're given permission to stop reading so that you can make private conversation with Mrs. Bailey. And is the little princess looking forward to being a bride? And is the little princess looking forward to being a bridesmaid? Mrs. Bailey trilled at me when I put the coffee pot down. Not really, I said politely. I don't like dressing up. I particularly don't like frilly dresses or things with bows. Ah, weddings are different though, she said. Weddings are the one time we can let our hair down and indulge. I stared at her, resplendent in a whole forest of greens. It looked like she'd indulged already. Now your little counterpart, Felicity, has already started about talking about what colour she wants. A delightful child, Felicity is. Simply delightful. I stared at her stonily, hating Felicity quietly and desperately. She's got lovely curls, Mrs. Here Mrs. Bailey looked at my short stubby hair and shook her head sadly. So we thought pale lemon would look fabbo. Something in watered silk, perhaps, with just the weeniest little peplum frill round the middle and the tiniest indulgence of embroidered flowers across the bosom. How gorgeous, Mum said, coming back in with the homemade biscuits and looking at me pointedly. Doesn't that sound lovely, Katie? I didn't say anything. Speak up, darling, Mum said, a tone of desperation in her voice. I can't, I said. You told me I had to be polite. Ha ha ha! Mum laughed falsely. Don't they show you up, these children? Mrs. Bailey's quite powdered face creased and smirked at me. She obviously thought I was quite overcome with the thought of such a dress, and I thought the sweetest little circlet of artificial flowers around the head, she went on, with perhaps a dinky artificial pearl dropping gracefully over the forehead. Will you excuse me? I said earnestly and politely. I have to go to the lavatory. Oh dear. Poor old Katie's really not impressed with this lark, is she? Do you think things will get better for her, Joni-Marie? Or do you think they'll get worse? You think they'll get worse for a bit and then get better? I think you might be right, but we'll see. We'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much, everybody, for watching, subscribing, commenting. It really makes my day when you do. And Joni-Marie and I will see you soon. Cheerio, everybody.